Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another C3 Workplace webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about crunching the numbers and are you ready for your first hire? It's a subject and a conversation that I have with my clients and prospects on a very regular basis. And as you may know, C3 Workplace, we've been helping small businesses to start and grow for over 20 years. This happens to be Small Business Week, so it's only fitting that we celebrate Small Business Week because that's who we serve. And we serve small business by providing flexible office space, administrative support services, bookkeeping services, educational and networking events. In fact, the C3 stands for Connect, Collaborate, Community. We believe when you bring small business together, the power of collaboration will fuel their success. So we're building a community of like-minded people, and one of the ways we do that is through these type of educational events. So in the spirit of collaboration, we've brought together a panel for you today to talk about crunching numbers and are you ready for your first hire. Before we get into the webinar, just a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this webinar and it will be available later. Also, you as a participant, you are muted, and you will see that there's a chat window within your WebEx utility. So if you have any questions, just feel free to type them in that chat window, and I'll do my best to interject them into the conversation. Honestly, if we don't get to them, you can email them to me, and I will make sure that one of our expert panel get back to you with an answer. So with all of our housekeeping out of the way, let's kind of jump into our topic. Now, let me introduce a panel to you. First of all, we have Maria Farris. Maria, say hello.
Hello, everybody.
Excellent. So Maria is here representing GBW Insurance Brokerage, and they specialize in commercial and business insurance with a niche in restaurant industries. And Maria, as you might have been able to tell from her accent, speaks several languages, including Italian, Spanish, and thank you for all of us, English. We also have with us Laura Melville. Laura, can you say hello?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Welcome. Laura is the accounting manager here at C3 Workplace. She leads our bookkeeping division, and she is a certified public accountant and a QuickBooks certified pro advisor, working with small businesses for over 20 years. In parentheses, she has ouch, but you'll get no sympathy from me, Laura. Okay, and Laura Osborne, can you say hello?
Hello, everybody.
Welcome, welcome. Laura is the founder of Crothers HR Consulting, which she founded in 2011 after 20 years of corporate HR leadership experience at Fortune 500 companies, where she was known for getting things done. She and her team now focus on helping small business create their HR programs and practices in alignment with their culture. So as you can tell from our introductions, we've got quite a bit of experience to share with you on this topic of are you ready for your first hire and crunching the numbers. So it's a pretty robust conversation and topic, and we're going to try and cover as much area as we can. So I think, you know, when I have small business owners come to me and we have a lot of solopreneurs, or people who start as solopreneurs. They open a business, perhaps they're an attorney or a web designer, and you know they're particularly good at practicing law, but then all of a sudden the business starts to grow, and now they have to be good at marketing and managing and many different things that they never thought they'd have to know, including bookkeeping. And so hopefully early on they start to have a conversation as to, you know, does this really make sense and can they do it all? And the reality is they can't. So I think where we want to start is to kind of talk about the money, because the reality is if you're a solopreneur, taking that leap to bringing on a person is a financial decision. So, the first thing I think we have to do is analyze, can we afford a new hire? So, Laura Melville, can you talk to us a little bit about that aspect and how our participants might analyze things and prepare themselves to really get a sense of, can they afford that new hire, and what are some of the things they should be looking at?
Sure. There's two very important questions you'll have to answer. First, you have to know if you're truly profitable or not. Do you currently generate enough income to support the potential employee as well as yourself? These answers should be very clear to you when you're reviewing your financial statements, your profit and loss statement on a regular basis. Secondly, if you are profitable, do you have enough cash flow to cover your payroll, say every other week or every 2 weeks, however you decide you want to pay the payroll. You'll also need to know if that cash flow will be available to cover all of the additional costs you will incur as an employer, such as payroll taxes, payroll service fees, insurances. Right.
Now, is there a guideline? Is there a certain reserve that you recommend people have in place before they go out? Because the truth is, it doesn't necessarily have to be a full-timer, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit as well, but there are different ways to get help. So is there a particular reserve that they should be looking for?
Well, when they look at their profit and loss, they also have to kind of do a little bit of budgeting, and they need to, it depends on how much the employee will be working or what they want the employee doing. So it's kind of a multi-step process going through all of your financials to kind of see where you want to end up.
Gotcha. And like most things in entrepreneurship, everything we do in entrepreneurship and in small business is calculated risk. So the reality is you have to have the data available to be able to decide, is now the right time, and how much can I allocate, as you talked about, budget to bring on some additional help. Now, of course, we all know that when you bring someone on, you have hourly wage or you have project costs if it's an outsourced situation. But Maria, talk to us a little bit about insurance, because I think that I find when people start to think about bringing on someone, they often think the insurance is optional. So tell us, if they're about to bring on an employee, what types of insurance do they need to have in place and why?
Absolutely, and it's very important for people to know that one of the insurance, the worker comp, it's not optional. Once they hire a person, they're required by the law to carry worker compensation. And worker compensation is an insurance that an employer buys to avoid from them to getting sued. So, and by law, you have to carry, and if they find out that you don't have it, there is a $5,000 penalty. And after the first day, if you do not get worker comp, there is $5,000 every 10 days that you don't get that insurance.
Yikes. Okay. So, go ahead.
Worker comp, people have to understand it's a percentage. It's decided by the state of New Jersey based on your risk, based on your job. That's how much you're going to pay. One of the example I can give you, if you are an office, employee working in the office, your rate could be a 25 cents per 100. So to have an idea, if you're paying $1,000 a month for that person, you have a $25 insurance plus, there's other costs, but that's how much it's going to cost you. If you're a carpenter, the rate is about 19%. So it's very important for you to know ahead of time how much that will cost you. And that one you have to carry. But then we have the employment liability insurance. And that one, it's optional, but it's very important. That protects the employer in case he gets sued, in case somebody say, they were wrongfully terminated for sexual harassment, discrimination, and so on.
Excellent. And the workers' comp is an issue we're going to talk about later too when we come to 1099s, and certainly, insurance in addition to your rate of pay, whether it's a subcontractor, a part-timer, or a full-timer, you've got your insurance costs. But Laura, Melville, talk to us about other costs that we really need to be aware of.
Sure. If you do have employees rather than subcontractors, you would be responsible for payroll taxes. Employers generally can expect to pay, 11 to 15% of the gross wage, depending on where you live and work. Another factor is payroll processing fees. Although some employers do choose to take that payroll processing on themselves, I feel it's really important to realize that there's a multitude of rules and regulations and deadlines that, in my opinion, you're better off handing off the payroll to a qualified payroll service and letting them help you be compliant. There's just a lot of that going on.
Right.
There's also several, indirect costs that are sometimes not thought of when making this very important decision on whether to hire someone or not. They'll need workspace. They'll need furniture, computers, office supplies, and as well, you'll have to find this employee, and that involves recruiting and then ultimately training that employee as well.
Right. Yeah, we talk about this a lot. There's the hard dollar cost of having an employee. You've got their wages, their taxes, their insurance, whatever equipment or whatnot they need to work. But, the reality is, in my opinion, the time it takes and the process is such a huge cost in this process. Laura Osborne, talk to us a little bit about the process, because once you decide that you want to bring someone on, that's one part of the decision. But now, where do we go from there? We've looked at our finances. We've decided, okay, we can allocate X dollars to this. Tell us, Laura Osborne, what do you recommend in the way of a process?
Okay, Donna. So I think some of this process you might even want to be doing at the same time as you're determining how much you can afford and when, because you want some of this information to make those decisions. So you want to start by thinking about what's the job this person's going to do. And there's lots of ways to go about finding that out. One easy way is to think about all the things as the owner you love to do and you're good at, and what are the things that don't fit into those buckets that you can outsource to someone else that aren't as good. And then what are the things that really aren't outsourceable but are business critical things that you want done in-house, right? And that would be some things you would put into a job description. Then you would need to think about how much are you going to need to pay for that job, and there's different things that we can talk about to help you find that. And then you would look at where do you need to post that job, and most of the posting sites have fees associated with them. Some of them are monthly fees. They're usually about $500 a month, but there are some sites that pay per hit. So depending upon how popular your job is and how many hits you get, it can be less than that. Some good sites like Indeed. You're going to want to look at your own network to see, once you have this job description together, who can you network with to see if they might know people for you. And then you're going to need time, your time to review the resumes that come in, to conduct phone screens on some of them, to bring in people for in-person interviews. So that's kind of the process and some timing around it that I would think of.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more. We are very process-driven here at C3 Workplace, and we always start by analyzing what's the job description so that we can get really clear not only on the hard skills or the technical skills that someone needs, but there are also, I think, soft skills that you have to take into consideration, whether it's organization, whether it's communication, but those are things that you have to be very cognizant of as you start to screen applicants. And just kind of a side note, Laura, are there any resources that you're aware of where people can get a sense of what competitive or comparable pay scales are?
There are, Donna. Indeed, which is a great new recruiting source, has a good job pricing database where you put in the job and you put in the location you're looking to fill it, and it will give you, based on the data of people that have filled jobs in Indeed, what the average price that job is going for. The other places that are good, there's a lot of free surveys produced by a professional association. So if you're going to hire an engineer, if you go in and you look at the engineering journals, you know, they're usually annually, different sources do compensation surveys. And then there's places like salary.com that you can buy the data for, which is going to cost you a few $100s.
Okay, got it. Salary.com and Indeed. You know, we use Indeed, and I know that I would imagine, certainly in the small business community, when people go to recruit their own hires, many of them are using Craigslist because it's free. And I have to say, from my experience, I've used Indeed and I've used Craigslist, and I'm going to share a great secret that we as an organization, I honestly wish I could give credit to the person who told me this, but I can't remember who it was. When you run an ad on Craigslist, about 3/4 of the way through your ad, include a paragraph that says, attention to detail is very important in this position, so please include the word elephant in the subject line when you are responding. The word doesn't make any difference, but the reality is we have taken our screening of those resumes down so much because most people aren't actually reading the ad, they're just sending their resume. And honestly, those aren't the candidates for us. So a little trick there is put something in your Craigslist ad that makes them customize their subject line, which makes it much faster for you to screen all those resumes that you get on Craigslist. That said, more often than not, my better candidates are coming from Indeed, even though it costs a little bit of money. So we talked about job description. Laura, and I've had so many people come to me after they have hired the college friend that was home for the summer, or a cousin, a sibling. Talk to us a little bit about hiring friends and family, because, you know, we want to help, but is it the right thing to do, or is there a better way to go about it?
Yeah, you know, Donna, it's funny. I get that question a lot, too. And I think it depends upon if you've gone through that thoughtful process and you know the skills that you need, and you can get someone that's a referral, whether it's a friend or a family or someone's kid that fits those skills that you need, then it might be a good hire. But I find that sometimes people find the resource and then they try to design the job around the resource, or they just want a warm body in the seat. And so we always say you want to interview slow and fire fast, right? So I know you go by this one too, Donna. And really, people need to be thoughtful about that process and make sure they know what are the competencies, what is the criteria, what are the kinds of things this person's going to need to do, and then see where it can best be filled. And sometimes it is a friend or family member. Obviously, the sticky part, once you've hired someone that's a friend or family member, is if it doesn't work out. So we really talk about setting expectations up front and even talking to the person about, hey, this is a business relationship as well as a friendship, and so talking up front about if this doesn't work, how are we gonna deal with that?
Right, right. And I think that if you have created a written job description with both technical skills and soft skills, the conversation is, this is what it takes to succeed in this position, as opposed to you did this or you didn't do that. It's what does it take to be successful in this position. So let's talk a little bit, Laura, about the interview process. Do you have a particular style or process that you recommend people incorporate?
You know, one of the things I find most helpful in interviewing is asking behavioral questions that are related to the skills you want them to do. So have them tell me about a time when you had to deal with a challenging customer. You know, tell me about a time when you had to fire someone. Tell me about a time, your biggest challenge and how you overcame it. And so I find if you can word a question where they can't answer yes, no, but they have to give you an example, you get some insight into their thought process and how they do things. You know, I think we all have some favorite questions, right, that help us get insight into people. I'll share with you guys one of mine that catches people off guard, and they tend to tell you the truth, is you say, if I was to call some of your coworkers, you know, at your current job or your last job and ask them, what do you think about Laura? What's it like to work with Laura? What would they tell me? And in the person's head, they think, oh my gosh, she's going to call them. And so they start telling you the truth. Well, they tell you that sometimes I'm cranky, but blah, blah, blah. And they, you know, they start really telling you what they think people will say.
That's amazing. It's almost like you're putting it in a third person, so they're inclined to be more honest. That's great. We too, you know, we at C3 Workplace, because part of what's always integral to our support positions is phone, we have an in-depth phone interview, which we find to be a great use of our time, the candidate's time, and it gives you a sense of what their presence on the phone will be, which is important to the position here. And we also ask her, you know, as many of you have heard, C3 Workplace, we are a values-driven organization, so we will have that type of conversation with the candidate during the phone interview, because honestly, I don't even want to schedule a face-to-face interview if I don't think there's a values match. So we will ask them, we will explain what our values are, we'll ask them what their values are, and I think that interviewing is very much like a sales process. Our job is to get them talking. Our job is not to, you know, do a presentation on our company, although we have to tell them a little bit, but our job is really to get them talking. And my feeling also is if there is a particular skill that is very important to the position, I have different questions about that particular skill at various points in the interview process, because I want to make sure that I get the consistent, correct answers. For us, it's kind of attention to detail. It's so important. And, you know, one of my favorite questions to ask is, how do you avoid mistakes in your work? It sometimes stumps people, but very often they have great answers for it, and that's what's important to us. Another question we always ask someone is, if you're presented with something you don't know how to do, how do you figure it out? I had an intern who pursued me, and her answer to that question was, well, first, I look at all the drop-downs in the program. If I don't see it there, then I Google it, and if I don't see it there, I go to YouTube. I hired her, and she's great. So that was important, being able to figure things out. So I think we each have to create the interview process that makes sense for our particular position, and that process clearly will be different for one position versus another. Now, yeah. Laura, anything else before we kind of move on from the interview process?
Yeah, two more things that I would recommend people think about is for small companies, you really want to find somebody that's flexible, because I think what you'll find is their job continues to change and morph as your business grows and changes. And so the more flexible the person can be and you can interview for that, the better. The second is for cultural fit. I asked a lot of questions about what was the best boss you ever worked for and why? You know, what was the best company you ever worked for and why? Because you want to find out what style they work best under. As you know, most people leave a job not because of the job or the compensation, but because of the bad fit with their manager. Not as much. And so you want to make sure that your style is complementary to the way this person likes to work.
Great information. Now, you said this kind of at the beginning, and we very much agree on this. You hire slow and you fire fast. In my opinion, hiring the wrong person is one of the most expensive things that small business owners do. But what is even more expensive, and I see it happen again and again and again, is they keep the wrong person. And that is a very expensive process, and that's something that really needs to be avoided. So very often in this small business realm, we're starting with part-timers. So Laura Melville, talk to us about payroll part-timer versus 1099 part-timer, and when can and can't we do that?
Okay. Sometimes there's quite a bit of confusion on this. Just as a slight overview, employees are reported, their wages are reported on a W-2 at the end of the year, and their employers are responsible for the employer taxes on their salary and wages. Subcontractors are reported on a 1099 at the end of the year, and the contractor is responsible for both parts of the payroll tax, that being the employee portion and the employer portion. So many employers or potential employers think, well, it's obvious, hire subcontractors and maybe avoid the payroll tax. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. The IRS is kind enough to provide guidelines on how to differentiate between the two. There's no exact rules or a list of rules, but they are, in fact, guidelines. And businesses have to look at these guidelines and kind of determine for themselves where their worker falls in. So they need to look at three factors. The first one being behavior. Does the business have the right to control what the worker does and how the worker does the job? The second one is financial. Would the worker's expenses be reimbursed? Who provides the tools and supplies? And who decides the pay rate? And the third factor is the type of relationship. Will there be a contract? Is the work relationship most likely to continue or be short-term? And is the work that the worker doing a key aspect of the business? And when all is said and done, when you look at these three factors, the more control the business has over the worker, the more likely it is that the worker is an employee.
Right.
And a word of advice I have on this is when you're in the decision-making process, and especially if you choose to treat them as a subcontractor, you should document these three factors and how you came to your decision, how you came up with a determination that they were, in fact, a subcontractor rather than an employee. I just think it's good to always have that information on file just in case.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Yeah, I think, I personally have been audited by the state of New Jersey. This was quite a few years ago for this specific topic because, there are taxes that weren't paid because I paid actually a transcriptionist as a subcontractor. And it was rather involved, and I had to get my accountant involved. And what I can say is for me, after that, we pretty much don't do anything as a 1099er anymore because I think it's an area that is a bit under a microscope as well. But along those lines, if we are lucky enough, sort of, to hire someone as a 1099, Maria, talk to us about the insurance implications. Is there any difference? What are the insurance requirements if they are a 1099er?
That's a lot of people get very confused over the 1099. When you hire a person, you hire that person to do a job. So they're working for you. So that means you're responsible for them if something happens. Now, if you're getting somebody as a subcontractor who's a company, they may carry their own worker comp, they may carry their own liability. So in the beginning, you may require a certificate of insurance, a proof of worker comp. If they do carry it, then you are free of responsibility. But if they don't, you are responsible. So you do have to carry a worker comp even for 1099. Even if you don't carry a payroll, but because you're hiring people to do a job for you, you are responsible.
Right, right. And if you are in the kind of industry, and we didn't really talk about E&O insurance, which is really a separate conversation, but if they're doing something for you that would impact your professional standing, then your professional liability would need to cover them as well. Right, so just because they're a 1099er does not affect your insurance at all. And, you know, I know this can be very overwhelming, and we're running over a little bit, but the truth is you really can't scale your business without taking on some sort of help. So, Laura, we talked about numbers, Laura Melville, we talked about numbers at the beginning, but talk to us a little bit about kind of forecasting and looking for the ROI or the return on investment.
Okay, sure. You know, we all know that the goal of that first hire is to enable you to make more money. So you obviously want to know how much additional revenue will your new employee help generate, whether it's on their own or by allowing you to do what you do best to grow your business. You want to know how quickly this will happen. When can you expect to see results? What results can you expect to see? So with all that said, it's really important to plan out, you know, and I say maybe 12 months or so. Create a monthly budget, and I don't mean just taking your expected revenue and expenses, dividing by 12, or copying last year's actual results. You know, give it careful, conservative consideration. You know, look at the last year or two by month. Do you see recurring ups and downs or other patterns? And then use that information along with what your expected changes to revenue and expenses are with the new employee to plan the next month, you know, next 12 months, a month at a time. And equally important, review your actual results compared to what you budgeted. I would say at least quarterly, if not even monthly, but see how you're doing. It's okay to adjust the budget going forward. It's important to make adjustments as needed so that you get where you want to be.
Very good. And you know what I heard you said that I really want to repeat is you said give it careful, conservative consideration. And I think whenever it comes to the finances of our business, we really have to be both careful and conservative. And that is kind of ties into what I originally said about everything we do is a calculated risk. So how we minimize our risk is by knowing our numbers, working through our process. This is a big topic that we could go on for quite a long time, but we've run out of time. So just to recap, the reality is we can't scale without people. They may be full-time, they may be part-time, they may be 1099ers. You have to know your numbers. Anyone who knows me has heard me say that very often. And as Laura and I both say, hire slow, fire fast, because really hiring the wrong person is so expensive because it takes so much of your time to recruit that person, to manage that person, and then what I've seen people do is it's not working and now they're going to work harder to fix it. And very often that's not the right answer, so keeping the wrong person is even more expensive. As Maria shared, insurance is not optional, both workers' comp and in liability insurance. You need to know where the ROI and the break-even is going to be for you. And when I work with people and I say to them, okay, you're ready to get some help, what can you budget for that? And we have a whole conversation. If they are going to budget, I don't know, $500 a week or a month or whatever, the reality is as you make that investment, just as much as you need to know your numbers, you need to know exactly what behavior is going to drive the revenue to cover that cost, whether it's that employee's behavior or subcontractor or part-timer, or whether it's your behavior. If that person is taking things off of your desk so that you can drive more revenue, then make sure that's what really happens. And as Laura said, you have to monitor it as you go. Again, it's a very robust topic. I want to thank each of our panelists for sharing their expertise today. Up on the screen, you will see all of our email addresses. If you have any other questions that you think we can help you with, please reach out to us and we will gladly address your questions. And of course, this is not a process that you have to go alone. Laura Melville is available to help you analyze your finances. Laura Osborne can help you with your process, and Maria is happy to help you with insurance and what you need in order to bring someone on. And I just have to say, I love that we get to do this and we get to demonstrate this is collaboration. This is my vision. This is how we help each other, is we come together, we lend our expertise, and we each take something away. So, again, thank you for attending today. In celebration of Small Business Week, we have many more events going on. You can visit our website at c3workplace.com. If you go to the event page, you can see all the different events that are listed there. C3 Workplace, we have many services to offer. We've got flexible office rentals. We've got all kinds of back office support, including bookkeeping and controller level services that Laura Melville offers. And very often people are not quite ready for our services. We actually have an annual membership so that you can be part of our community. We'd be happy to address any and all your questions. And again, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, and always glad and, happy to help.
Excellent. And so we'll wish each of you a great rest of your day and a great rest of Small Business Week. Thank you all for participating.